Well, on that basis, shall we get going?
Sure.
You might notice my voice is a tad scratchy. It happens to me every time I teach a long block, and this time I've added to it a small viral infection, so don't get too close to the laptop, otherwise you might get a computer virus.
Not people with Macs.
Okay, Peter Gray asked me this horrible question. Does the right of abatement apply to trees growing on Crown Council land growing into private property? What's your guess?
Well, I'm going to say no.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
going to say yes. The law, common right laws are there, and they still apply. The question is there a statute of some description or a legal document that stops you from doing that? And then that right of abatement needs to be fair and reasonable. In other words, it can't go damaging the tree. So if it was a branch that was hanging over the fence and you wanted to cut the lower branch off, for example, to access your caravan down the side of your property, that would be doable under common law if it wasn't going to result in removal of, a leaning tree. You're going to cut the top of it, it's just a branch. That would be acceptable. Unless there's something like in New South Wales where we have a tree preservation order or vegetation order in some parts of Queensland, Victoria, and those areas, statute law overrides. But the fact that it's owned by the Crown doesn't remove the Crown from the common law ruling. So common law applies to it does to anyone else. It's the way that the courts say gentlemen would behave. And one would hope, guess somewhat tongue-in-cheek here, one would hope that the Crown is always going to behave like a gentleman. It doesn't always do so, but that's what we aim at. So, yeah, it's exactly as if it was somebody else's trees.
Okay.
So,
Andy's got a question.
Yep. Go ahead, Andy.
Just in regard to that, Mark, I work for council, and it's a situation that comes up often, and it relates to the legislation, the Trees Act, disputes between neighbours.
Yep.
But I think it's something very, very old. Like the original one was where you pruned your neighbour's branch. You were meant to then throw it over their fence so that they could make use of the fruit that was probably attached to that branch. What we insist upon when we tell people that they could use that statute is that the work has to be carried out to Australian standard.
That's right. We've got to do it in a way that minimises the harm to the tree. If we're doing a common law right, remembering statute law is common law, and the common law one goes back to a couple of cases, but the most commonly quoted one is Lemon v. Webb. And then the issue what you do with the branches. Chief Justice Preston raises in Robson v. Leschke. He says that should be offered back to the neighbour, the neighbour's property, and you don't want to be involved in conversion or thievery, stealing on the neighbour's property. And again, whilst it is growing over your fence, it's not your thing. Exactly the same what applies to fruit. So they've got a lovely big tree, this carica, overhanging your property. It's full of fruit. And you think, oh, I'm just going to go out and pick myself, half a case of beautiful, big, ripe figs. You'd be stealing them. You actually have to ask the neighbour.
The Trees Disputes Between Neighbours Act doesn't apply to council.
No, it doesn't. But the judgment in that situation explains what the common law rights are. So under common law, Lemon v. Webb, I'm pretty sure it's Lemon v. Webb, says abate the nuisance. So you have the right to abate it, but the property, the parts that you prune off aren't yours. They've got to be offered back to the owner of those parts, which is the tree owner. So
Yeah, but you can't just hurl the branches over the fence and make a nuisance of yourself doing that either.
That's actually trespass at that point of time. So again, there's these fine subtleties. Because you're doing it with intent and it's going over the boundary, that's an action of trespass, according to Preston's in Robson v. Leschke. So realistically, 95 or 90% of all stuff to do with trees in the law, in terms of common law, addressed in that judgment. So it's worthwhile reading. Common law applies, doesn't matter where you are in Australia. So there's a sort of a fairly clear, useful educational judgment. And it was written that way. It was written, I think we often say you could have probably got the whole judgment done in the last 6 paragraphs. The whole purpose of the Chief Justice was to help everyone understand and know where they stood. So quite scholarly. Yes, Andy.
Just with council, like we refer to ourselves as a neighbour when we have people who are quite insistent. They say, "Oh, your tree is overhanging our property," and I explain the act to them, and I say, "Well, we have 47,000 neighbours in this place, and we can't possibly maintain every branch that intrudes into your property." So councils are actually exempt, I believe, under that act.
Yeah, they do, and I think that's a shame, Andy. I think something that the organisation that represented local government at the time, the Local Government Tree Resources Association, pushed very hard for. But I think my experience has been that the Land and Environment Court, in making orders under that act, have shown incredible discretion and understanding. And I think in general, councils would be no worse off, if not better off, had they been bound by the act. Because first, most of these things don't end up in court. We've got several million households in 100 or so applications a year, so it's quite a small number. And most people that live on a block of land have 4 neighbours, one on either side, one on the back and one on the front, and you're only 1/25th of those. So if you imagine that council were dealing with things, it would probably have over New South Wales maybe 25 cases a year amongst all the councils to address and answer questions, and that's really not a lot. Disadvantage that the local government has is they can still be done for negligence. They can still, sorry, not negligence, for nuisance. They can still be gone for damages beyond what you'd get out of the Land and Environment Court. So we end up with some fairly large judgments that have already been made against local government that, had they gone with the act, they wouldn't be able to. So I think it was, as you say, that this fear of, we've got so many properties, we're going to be constantly battling it out. But what happened is the first year or 2 or 3 settled things really well, and it became clear to the legal practitioners and the arborists that specialise with those legal practitioners that in most cases it's just a part of grown-ups behaving like grown-ups and sucking it up, rather than this, oh, we're going to sue everybody. And so we did have for a while a full-time commissioner, tree commissioner, and Commissioner Fakes. I know that they've just advertised recently, and I believe they're in the process of appointing a new tree commissioner. I have some insight. But I'm pretty sure that that commission will be a part-time commissioner, and that collectively they make 1 day's work a week, and that's it, which is not a lot of tree-related issues when you think of what they anticipated. It's quite a small number, and a part of that is what's asked of us as arborists is really set some sensible benchmarks. We just can't walk in and say, well, that tree's dangerous. They want some logic and some rationale. We can't just walk in and say, well, that tree's clearly damaging the wall. They want evidence as to why we say that. Not only do they want evidence, but on a number of occasions, acting commissioners have made clear that what it wants is, for example, calculations from a structural engineer. And that's something that I seldom see. What I get is a structural engineer saying, well, there are tree roots and the wall is cracked. It's obviously the tree roots. And frequently they're just dismissed outright. The court is seeking for a little bit more informed information than that. And the sad news is in that situation, even if it was the roots doing it, once they've had a go at it and they've not done it, it's really a hard process to raise it back up again without good rationale as to why they're doing that. So they can't get a second and a third and a fourth bite unless there's evidence that comes forward that they wouldn't have had the ability to access at the time of the original application. So I think, my view of the Act, I had some reticence about it in the earlier days, but I think it's done an exceptional job of fulfilling the needs. And realistically, compared with Queensland, I'm sorry, I feel sorry for people that are north of the border. If you're from there, you might want to say hi and give us some comments. But we really have done an exceptional job in New South Wales, I have to say.
Mark, don't they have a similar act in Queensland?
Yeah, look, it's a weird act, and it's made by weird processes. They don't have a tree commissioner. They have a commissioner or a member, and that person probably has no information or knowledge about trees, so then it's up to the quality of the arborist evidence. And I think we both know that when it comes to reports and arborists giving evidence, there can be such an enormous disparity that it's almost offensive. And so I saw recently, for example, a case in Queensland where a hoop pine had to have the cones cut off every year because the cones could drop with severe consequences. Now, I don't know of any place in the world where hoop pine cones are removed. It's a risk. They're, commonplace tree in not just Australia, but in places like Florida, Hawaii, Asia. I just can't imagine somebody saying that the consequence would be severe. But again, it was the opinion of the arborist giving it that it was severe, and the member had no choice but to rely on that opinion.
So it's like a tribunal that decides the matters?
Yeah, tribunal, not a court.
And the main problem is that the tribunal doesn't have any tree expertise.
Doesn't have any tree expertise. They're at the mercy of those that give evidence.
Surely they would have to decide whether they preferred the evidence of one party or the other.
Often there's a jointly appointed expert, and experts are very loose terms for what they get.
So they both sides will agree to appoint an expert, and so the expert actually says what's what.
He gives information, and then the member makes decisions based on that expertise. And I can tell you about experts and the things they believe. Like, for example, there should be no lemons and gums in public places because are all dangerous. So an opinion like that means that we would get rid of every lemon and gum. pretty catastrophic.
Hmm. Interesting.
So it's a difficult one. So yeah, Queensland hasn't done anywhere near the same job. The other thing is, in Queensland, for example, you have right to solar access, whereas in New South Wales we have no right to solar access. If you've got solar access, you've got it. If you don't have it, you don't have it. That's the way it goes. No removing the solar cooling to put in solar panels to run the air conditioner to cool the house. It just doesn't work that way.
Hmm.
And I don't think you've got anything in Victoria yet, else. And again, not sure. Victoria seems in some ways, I've got to be careful because this is on record, but it seems to be a little bit draconian. So, for example, you still have strict liability with workers' compensation. Most of the rest of the world went away from that about 15 years ago, but congratulations, you're still there. Most of the rest of Australia has gone to uniform civil laws on liability. Victoria had to modify it, and it's just the way it is. Victoria sees itself as a very special, unique place. So whilst the majority of its population said no voice, it says, yes, we're going to get a voice because that's what democracy is about, doing what the people said no to. So really interesting state.
I didn't know any of that.
Yeah. It's a sad little end of the world. There's some things about Victoria that are absolutely amazing. Don't take me wrong, but growing rates, real social upheaval. It's a difficult time for you guys trying to refine yourself. Whereas 20 years ago, you're all about cafes and fine dining and the arts. A lot of that now is on the back burner. And before that, you were the garden state, the great gardens. Now it's the great subdivision heading north state.
You're not wrong about that.
Yeah, it's, it's inevitable. We're all going to have these problems, but you're struggling a bit more in Victoria, and trees are a part of it. Trees really define areas, and when you end up with areas without any trees of any real size, and we have them here, Warren Park in Sydney is exactly the same. I see Chris Gorringe there. Christian, take your mic off. Warren Park, you just want to tear your hair out and say, who designed this? How is this allowed to be? And I guess, it's this balance between built form and the wonders of having trees, and unfortunately trees constantly.
We actually had a new clause come into action on the 15th of September down here. Have you heard about that
Tell
one?
me about it.
The native tree protection. It's an amendment to whatever the old planning provision was. So you need a permit now for anything that's taller than 5 meters and a trunk circumference over 0.5 meter, and a canopy spread of 4 meters. So anything that's bigger than that, you'll need a permit to remove all through Victoria now. Well, depends on the what's it called, the zoning, but most zones where you have houses will have that.
Is that statewide? Not.
Yeah,
local?
yeah. It's all of Victoria. They didn't give us any warning. They just dumped it on us, and it's
That's the way good
going pretty
democracy
nuts in
works.
Melbourne, I think.
Don't consult and dictate.
Yeah. It's definitely a lot of businesses that get affected from it, because obviously they need to get a permit now to do any tree work, pretty much, because every tree is bigger than
good
that.
sides, and we've had similar legislation since 1979 in metropolitan in particular. And
I think some councils had that already, maybe in Melbourne and stuff, but yeah,
the
not
suburbs
not
did.
throughout the whole country. Yeah.
Yeah, we've actually got the
So
opposite
it's-
here, Neil. So there's an area where we're not as good. We've got some councils that made a commitment that they will never support a tree preservation order of any description. That
Oh,
their
wow.
DCP will never prevent people from removing trees. And again, I think that's a shame. I think there are times when we need to protect people from themselves, but I think
Yeah.
that should always be done with community consultation. You're always going to get some people that say no, but I'm pretty confident if you got together a panel of people that were interested in trees, you'd find that most of them would accept a sensible approach to tree retention and tree removal.
Yeah. It could probably be more tree specific, I think, because now it's like you've said before, you end up needing a permit to remove a rose bush to an
I have a
extent.
permit behind me to prune a rose bush, given to me by my council, because it had a piece of legislation at one stage that said a tree is anything that's more than a metre high and has the potential to grow to more than 3 metres in height. And so I needed to prune the roses. I needed to get a permit. And I did it because I thought that it was absurd and they needed to think it through. And they did, and they modified it. And I think that's good governance. And so I think oftentimes what you find is when these bits of legislation come in, and I know Andy takes to this, and so will Peter, when new legislation comes in, it takes a while for things to get ironed out. So you'll often have it reviewed at a year or 2 years down the line, and you'll see little changes and tweaks made. You know, we see it with our SEPs, which are our state planning policies, and we do have those. The other thing to be aware of course, is plant associations in Australia. The federal government overrides the state, and so the federal government sets the there are some areas where we might think that we can go out and remove trees because there's no state, well, where the local government hasn't enacted things, but the federal government has. So we just need to be aware of that.
There seems to be lots of different fire regulations as well that I'm fully unaware of. Like I know the bushfire management overlay and all that sort of stuff, but the last couple of years there's been a lot of removal of trees, and even like they wanted us to pull succulents out of this lady's front yard because there was a fire hazard.
Yes,
yeah, I don't know where that all comes from.
again, it comes from a
schools
misunderstanding
and
about
everything.
trees and a misunderstanding about a whole pile of things. You know, I see that mulch has got to be moved away from the building. Well, I mean, it's really rare to see mulch convert to flame. You can see it smolder. You know, we see things like, oh, you've got to get rid of the casuarinas because they're highly combustible. Well, they're not. They're fragiles. They've got no resin ducts. They're not highly flammable, but they're actually really good at catching embers. So I think, again, this is just about education, and this is about time, and we'll see progressively over time things change. Our code says that, for example, branches, you know, should not overhang the building. It doesn't say branches shall not. And the reason why I think it says should not is there are times when a branch overhanging a building is not going to be an issue. You've got a steel framed house with corrugated iron roofs. You know, I think the likelihood of a branch falling and breaching through the steel and resulting in fire entering the house is comparatively small. If you had that view, what you really should be saying is no tree should be within falling distance of the house. And that the result of that would be catastrophic. And one of the things that we do see is that houses that are burnt and houses that are not burnt are often separated by really things you wouldn't believe, like preparedness. So those people that have got trees often will do thin out their gutters. People that don't have trees believe they have no leaves in their gutters, and that's just erroneous. I'm ever amazed at how many tons, well, not tons, but certainly bucket loads of leaves come out in the filter system on our office. And the nearest tree would be, 15 metres away, something like that. But every good rainfall, we get at least a bucket of decayed material out of the roof. So, I believe that I don't need to do anything when a fire's coming. I had a combustible building with, tiled roofs. I'm probably going to have some more problems.
Yeah.
So, look, it just takes time to educate. And unfortunately, we're not the decision maker. And my advice to you would be don't try and ride too many at the same time. People that do that are usually called clowns. Two hats is a pretty bold deal. So if you're a landscape architect or a landscape designer and an arborist, that's probably getting near the limits. If you're a fire consultant and an arborist together, it's a pretty unusual combination. There are a few here that do that, but I think, again, they're probably pushing at the limits. Do one, do it exceptionally well. Don't do too half-heartedly.
If you're going to do more than one, you might as well do 10.
Yeah, if we're going to do 10, we know what the end result's going to be. You will look like a clown. Okay, so that was that one. Crown trees, similar thing. They belong to the crown, so you don't have the right to damage them. One of the things that's been talked about, there's an actual paper written by it, submission to the government, is the issue of this illegal vandalism of trees. And you're getting it down in Victoria. So we certainly have it here in New South Wales. We have it in Queensland, where people cut trees down for views because they don't like the tree around or whatever. And one of the points that came back that fascinates me every time is, well, there's, a fine is not really a good deterrent. And in New South Wales and Victoria, I don't know for Queensland, but I'm pretty sure it's there. Both in New South Wales and Victoria, there's legislation in the Crimes Act that allow for prosecution of the Crimes Act. And I see no mention of anyone ever doing it or even considering it. In New South Wales, it's Section 195 of the Crimes Act, malicious damage to property not otherwise herewith mentioned in the Act. And it's pretty clear, a tree's property. And if you damage it, even if it belongs to you and another party, so it was a boundary tree, and I think we talked about this once before. If it's a boundary tree, you both have ownership. The other party can't just go and decide to cut it down or cut it in half, as the great case that Alex Shargo talks about, where the person went with a rip straight down. That ended up in a prosecution that was successfully run.
But isn't one of the problems with dealing with people destroying trees that are in their view, for example, the difficulty is proving it?
That is always the difficulty. I can tell you that there have been some successful ones that have been dealt with in other ways, particularly under the Pesticides Act for misuse of herbicides. And there was one in the Blacktown courts where a person was prosecuted and fined $20,000 for having a herbicide disperse over the boundary and kill the neighbouring trees. And all they had to have was them spraying. The EPA came out and did the testing. They found sufficient residues of herbicide. The guy said, look, it was accidental, it wasn't on purpose, whatever, but he still ended up copping a fine. And then that's just one act. There's still the opportunity, or there was opportunity for the householder to say, okay, well, now we want compensation But I think they're probably pretty happy with the guy $20,000 fine. I think that is pretty impressive. And the problem we've got is with a lot of the things we just want to deal with what we call a penalty infringement notice, which is, you know, $3,000 or $6,000 fine. I think it is at the moment. Andy, you'd be more up to date with what a pin is out of it. Play with them.
Yeah, quite often we'll try to force the offender into rehabilitating the area. I sort of pass it on at that point. I'll go and inspect the area and report on the damage. And in some cases, tell the offender what they should be doing as far as getting a qualified consultant to prepare a plan for the wetland they've just destroyed, and how they're going to rehabilitate it, and then be prepared to come back to the table and cop it. But for some reason my name gets bandied around, and I'm often the person these people ring and say, "Oh, I didn't think I was doing anything wrong," and very ignorant.
Yeah, I just thought it was my right to go and paint the neighbour's driveway. I can't understand why, why there's something wrong with that. I mean, it's not mine. So what are they complaining about? I painted it for them. I got rid of those pesky trees.
It was a horrible bog, and I made it better. I drained it for them and took away all the mosquitoes.
Yeah. Look, I just had one where somebody said to me, "Oh, yes, we had a bridge that had to be replaced, so we just put a extended culvert in." I said, "Isn't that a waterway?" He said, "Yeah, well, we're just running the waterway through a culvert." And I thought, "Oh, but let's just hope that nobody ever finds out, because that's bad." And these things happen. It's not that you can't do it, but that you have to go through a whole development process to be able to do that, not just make an arbitrary decision that we go do something like that. So yeah, we deal with that all the time in terms of society being weird. Okay. Now I'm on my other one. Am I? Yes, I am. And I'm going to have to share. I think last time we said we'd just do a tab. I don't know that I can do that. So I'm going to go entire screen. My screen share, and hopefully it won't crash. Awesome. No, I thought you sent me a picture, Peter.
I thought I did too.
Yeah.
There was a picture. Maybe it didn't get included in the email.
No, I did see one. I've got one that's just come through.
That's one I sent through just a few minutes ago, I think.
It's from Lisa Barnes. Just wondering if we could look at these. Newly planted Angophora costata in DY. It's not Lisa. Yeah, it is Lisa Barnes. Oh,
Yes,
wow.
yes.
Down in DY. It's fungal. It's a leaf spot. It occurs on normally on Leuphostoma converse. So it's fungal. You can see now. See how I make that easier for you to see. You can see concentric rings. You there, Lisa? If you are, do you want to undo your microphone? And then,
yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, okay, great. So, Angophora, maybe on Leuphostoma convertus.
Yeah, it looks
Possible?
like it. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay. That's what I normally expect to see it on. Yes, it is. We're in 3 here. So 1, 2, 3 leaves in the same spot. Angophora is paired and opposite. These are world and obviously in 3. So yeah, it's not an uncommon problem. It'll usually rectify itself fairly quickly as the tree gets older.
Okay.
It's not overly problematic. I think they look quite spectacular. Sometimes they can be almost perfect. And every now and again, you'll see little black dots. If you look at those black dots under a dismal multiplication, 400 to 800 times, you can actually see that they're little pycnidia or little sporocarping bodies of the fungus. So that's what it is. It's just one of those things that happens.
Okay.
So good one. Well spotted.
Thanks. It's a lovely little tree. It's only a fairly newly planted tree, maybe a year ago, and yeah, it just looks like it's suffering pretty badly. 3/4 of the tree is covered, all the leaves covered in
Humid
it. So,
conditions, it'll just grow faster. As it gets bigger, there'll be less of it. Better air circulation, and that'll be it. It tends not to ever cause serious problems. And I wouldn't, if I had to do something, a generalized fungicide like mancozeb would probably be all that I'd use. But
Yeah.
generally,
All
so
right.
don't bother. So don't
Thanks.
bother would be what I'd say still.
okay. Thank you.
Excellent. My pleasure. And inbox, I'm just going to look, Peter, see if I can find that for you.
I just resent that, Mark.
Good. Thank you. I know I did see it.
I thought you had because you talked about it. So.
Yeah. I know. Well, I had a chinwag with him about it too. So in a few minutes, never the quickest mind in the world. Props was the question.
No, there they are.
And so we're discussing tree props, what things you should do, shouldn't do, can do, can't do to make things work better. And so this old prop is being removed, thank goodness. Those of you who have seen the Bland Street Oak at Carramar would know that I'd love to get rid of the props in that. The old continuous concrete prop is horrible. So a system where you've got some ability to have some movement certainly is some improvement. The question is, how would you improve this even still? I think allowing for some flexibility, and that's a really hard engineering process. You almost want a ball joint at the bottom here, and you want it to be able to go up and down as well. So you want some form of expansion and contraction process, like a hydraulic shock absorber to be able to, or pneumatic shock absorber to take the movement up and down. So the branches will get, of course, higher during the dormant season, and they want to come down. And the idea of these systems is to catch things, to support them permanently. The more you can let the tree move, the better it will deal with things. Now, the problem here, and I discussed this, is Nicholas. I discussed this with Nick. You wouldn't bother with that in most cases now, except we've already had this prop sitting there that's been altering the tree's behavior. And so we've now created a problem that, realistically we need to deal with. And Bland Street Oak is exactly the same. There's a horrible prop there that just has been left. I recommend removal back in the 1990s, and it's still there. So those would be things that I'd say look at. I'd certainly prefer a bolt that goes through, or a rod. I'd rather not have any thread going through. So there are things that we do to design better. And I was discussing this with Nick. I said, do you know the story of the Uke Man and the Oak Man? He said, no. And sadly, most of us don't nowadays, but there's an old poem by Donald F. Blair about the Uke Man and the Oak Man. You probably find it online somewhere. And essentially, it describes the difference between these two personas. And I think he described it something like this, you know, the Oak Man, he's the guy that drives the Volvo, goes to the opera, is a member of the Art Society, and he'll spend $4,000 trying to figure out how to do a $2,000 job better. And then there's the Uke Man. Now, he drives a car that's opened with a set of vice grips. It's probably got a crack to the windscreen. He serves his weekends doing detention. He rides a Harley Davidson at home. And nothing is better than a good quality fist fight. And whilst those are extremes, and he likes to be able to figure out how to get a tree down and do the least amount of damage with a single fell. So if he can get it in and just break a few roof tiles, a bit of gutter, a fence panel too, and get it down in one piece, that's a pretty good achievement. And so you get these personas that represent reality, and the reality is, where do you do it? And many years ago, the guy who invented hydraulic tree spades, a guy called Al Koenig, really clever man, but so clever that he spent constantly spending money trying to figure out how to do silly things better, that he went broke. And, you know, I think that's, and there's no indictment on him. I mean, his workmanship was wonderful, but you just have to know how to balance the difference between that and, you know, digging around the tree, putting a chain around it and ripping it out. There's a balancing process. So don't whatever you do, spend all your resources and all your time trying to build the perfect mousetrap. You only have to do one that catches mice. Of course, the Oak Man listening will be saying, "Oh, Mark, for goodness sakes, we can still do better." And they're probably right. And the Uke Man's saying, "Stuff it, just give me a gun and I'll shoot the damn things." So you've got to weigh that up always when you're thinking about it. You know, you don't have to get to perfection, but you sure as hell don't always have to settle at the bottom. And all of us have a little bit of a Uke Man and Oak Man in us, but to varying degrees.
Is a Uke Man supposed to be a eucalyptus man?
Yeah, Uke Man is for a eucalyptus man, and an Oak Man is. Let me see if I can find it on. Imagine it be on.
I find that semi-offensive. Like what these people don't like.
Oh, yes, I know. There's a Uke Man and an Oak Man already going for you. It's not meant to be. It's more meant to be just a display of. Yeah, there it is. When the Oak Man Met the Uke Man by Meredith Blair. I recommend it as a read. It'll just give you some idea of how things can be. It's really quite a clever piece. I won't attempt to read it because my throat is at its limits. So yeah, I think Nick's doing some neat work. And you know, one of the things that Nick is doing that I really like is his strain and load testing to see how his bracing and propping work is working. And I think that's a really big step forward compared with what we have been doing. So I'll open it to a few questions from the floor, but as you can hear, my voice is going, and I'm before the state architect tomorrow discussing a state significant development, so I want to try and present a little bit of my voice. So questions from the floor?
Got one regarding the value of statistical life and the QTRA. When I did my QTRA, the value of statistical life was $3.8 million.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that it's gone up a bit now.
4 million this
Yeah.
year using,
I read something about 5.2 or something.
well, so yes and no. QTRA says uses the Health and Safety Executive's value of statistical life. My personal recommendation is to use the value of statistical life from the Office of Prime Minister and Cabinet, which is thinking about 5.5 or 5.6 now. And the reason I suggest that is, first of all, it's definitely Australian. It's made by a decision made by the highest level of our government. So let me pull it up for you.
So how do you actually work that into your calculations then?
It's pretty easy. You just change the numbers down on the side to whatever it is at 5.6, and then if you're not talking about property damage, but a personal damage, your answer is just times. So your risk of harm is say 1 in 100,000. You 1 in 100,000 times 5.6. Here we are, Office of Prime Minister and Cabinet. That's 2022. There's one there somewhere for 2025. So the fact that it's from the Office of for 2023 was 5.4. We asked Gemini, see if we get it for for this year, but it says indexed, and there's a great paper that goes with it, and that paper is 80 or 90 pages long. There's a person's PhD, I believe, thesis, looks at how that's derived and why we should do that. And one of the comments that it makes is that, you know, in a real civilized society, I'd like to spend more on the human life. There's a limit, and that limit is this figure that the Australian government has, is how they decide, for example, whether we're going to get to play with your poo or not when you're 74. You're not able to do that. You get told no, you can't stick the stick into the poo and send it to the bowel cancer test kit. It's how we decide whether we're going to subsidise the medication and how much we're going to subsidise it. All those are made using this value of statistical life. And in general, we don't deal with that side of things. The people that really get this, and Andy, you can find them at your work as traffic engineers. Oh yeah, what speed road you're going to have, whether there's going to be a traffic calming device go in, whether they're going to traffic lights. If we put a set of traffic lights and they're going to cost us $2 million, we need to be able to save a human life over 20 years. Otherwise, you know, it really isn't a great investment. And I mean, I'm using those as broad figures. If you're a traffic engineer, for goodness sakes, don't freak out that I've said that. But it gives them that sort of concept. You know, if we can't get that sort of saving, then there's no point getting in. Now, if you had an area where a set of lights would save a life a year, it'd be worth your while spending $5.6 million and getting it done. Okay, so that's how they make decisions. And they do that not just in Australia, but worldwide. The drawback of adopting the Australian government's fossil for Prime Minister Cabinet is that you'll worry less about property and more people. And I like that, because I don't give a damn about property in real terms. And it is appropriate that we should think more about people. So that's how I apply it. So I don't worry about property. I almost never do a property assessment. Occasionally I will. And in that case, you can just substitute in and you figure it out. 5.6, because all in log 10. In terms of
do you use the? Sorry. Do you use
So
the
in ter-
calculator normally, or do you use the wheel, or you've
Um,
got it all in your head?
I do most of it in my head, unfortunately. But calculator online is a lot easier platform to play with. So because I'm going blind, that's that getting old. I'm going deaf, blind, and stupid all at once. So I'll pull up my calculator and I'll play chuff.
So it's the value of statistical life. Obviously, Mike hasn't done a revamp of the calculator. Is the value of statistical life still the same in the UK as when
It's still
he
£2 million.
created that calculator? Or?
So it's £2 million, and then what QTR has done is said £2 million in Australia this year is worth $4 million.
Yeah.
And in 2 years' time, maybe we'll do something really wonderful and spectacular like we seem to be doing, and it'll be £2 million is worth 6,000 Australian dollars, because we're really not that bright. Having said that, the POMs, no offense to any English people online either, sometimes they're not the brightest. So we might go the other way. And so that's the thing I like about it, is the value of statistical life from the Office of Prime Minister's Cabinet is uniquely ours.
Yeah.
And it's really, I'd really be comfortable in going to court and saying, look, I've given the protection of a person the absolute highest I can give it, because I've used Australian dollars and they're larger than the QTRA training.
Yeah.
Yep. The only time the QTRA calculator uses fossil is property damage. The rest of the time it's trying to determine what's fair and reasonable. What's reasonably practicable in the situation. And that's when you multiply whatever your answer is, 1 in 100,000, 1 in a million. 1 in a million is, just in the tolerable range. 1 in a million times 5.6 million. I've got $5.60 to play with. Going to get done this year for $5.60. Well, I've got $2.60 more than $4. So
if you've got, as a human occupation or pedestrian or whatever, you've got 1 in 100,000 on the calculator, that's doing $4 million it's calculating as $4 million.
yeah, so you've got let's just pull up 3. Have you got your calculator there?
Yep.
Sorry about this. If we said
No.
I've got 4 and 2, I don't think we even get high enough there. Okay. There. 342 gives us 1 in 500,000. Then all I would do then is say, well, 1 in 500,000. So put that in 1 divided by 500,000 times 5.6 million. And you can do that with a calculator. I'm not sharing now, but I'll do it for you with a calculator. You can just literally type it in. 1 divided by 500,000, 100, 123 times 5600000 equals $11.20 a year. Now, the risk is going to stay roughly at that level. Then, over 10 years, you've got $120 roughly to go out and solve the problem.
Yep.
What do you do for $120? You don't get an arborist in. Okay. Now, Mike told a wonderful story of a forester in the in the UK that recently republished a book that he published 50 years beforehand, and he took the crowns of trees and the canopy of trees, and there's this one shot with a massive big dead branch, and the dead branch 3 millimeters diameter 50 years ago, and it was 52 meters. 50 years later, the dead branch is 30 centimeters in diameter and 14 or 15 meters long. It's the only thing he said that you can pick in the image that's recognizable, because the tree has grown and changed so much, but the dead branch is so obvious. And so, you know, we often get to the thought, oh yes, we can solve problems quickly and cheaply, but in reality, my view of this tree is healthy, and the tree is not actively failing. It's not rocking the ground, not cracking. You know, there's nothing that would lead us to believe that its failure is likely to occur. Then the greatest harm that we'd ever do is doing something to the tree, the green part of the tree. Now, if I've got a branch that's cracking, that's imminent failure, cut the branch off. You know, if I've got a codominant stem that's cracking, well, we may be able to do some reduction and some bracing, ultimately. But the issue is we're worried about a tree with a lean, and we calculate the risk of harm is in that category. We just did one in what do we have? 1 in 500,000 or 400,000. 1 in 400,000, 500,000. 1 in 500,000. We should leave it alone. Where the tree will hurt more people, cause more harm than what we're doing.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, if you're changing the value of statistical life, explain why you're not following the stuff that you were taught in the course or in the practice notes. And that's easy enough to do. You know, to use the most contemporaneous Australian figures that have significant weight within Australia, the value of statistical life, the Office of Prime Minister and Cabinet has been selected.
Yeah,
I
thank
just
you.
come up with an answer without explaining what you've done and why. Okay?
Yeah,
No other questions?
thank you.
My pleasure. Well, Peter, we're due to meet again on what date? You knew I was going to do it.
Yes,
When we're going to do it again. It's the last
last
Monday
of the month. which
27th.
is 27th.
27th. Yep. I shall see you guys then.
Thank you
That
very
sounds
much. We've
good.
learned a lot.
Thank you.